Powered by Righteous Media.
Welcome to Independent Americans. Welcome to episode 327. I'm your host, Paul Reichoff. We've got a new format for you. I am going to walk and talk and take you out into the streets and into the communities because it is a time to improvise, adapt, and overcome to meet this moment. And it's a time to keep it real. And most of all, it's a time to stay vigilant. All right, so in this kind of a media environment, news is breaking constantly, and I'm getting tired of sitting behind a desk and doing a podcast that looks and sounds like so many others out there. So Chris Rosenthal, our great creative director, and I agreed we're gonna mix it up and we're gonna take it out in the streets. And this is attempt number one, version number one of our new format. I want your feedback. Let me know what you think. Do you like this new format? Do you hate it? Do you wanna be a part of it? And what should we call it? Walk and talk, beat the streets, Reich on the mic. We can call it whatever we want. We can just keep calling it Independent Americans. But I want your feedback. Let me know, and we will continue to evolve as we have for over 5 years and 327 episodes. This is a time to stay vigilant, but I'm going to start this new format in the way I've started so many of my other conversations. Where are you and how are you? And I'm going to start with myself. Each time I'll tell you where I am and how I'm doing and give you a no shit to start us off. So, where am I? Right now, I am in North Battery Park in Manhattan, New York City, USA. Behind me is the Irish Hunger Memorial. This is a memorial that was created to honor the hundreds of thousands of Irish people who died during the Great Hunger. And behind me is the World Trade Center, the new World Trade Center, the Freedom Tower. So that's where we're going to start. We're going to walk and talk, and we're going to get into all the latest. And coming up, you're going to hear my conversation with Pete Buttigieg that I recorded recently on Instagram. We're talking about the veteran firings that are happening around the country. We're, of course, talking about Donald Trump and Elon Musk. I challenge him on the state of the Democratic Party and much more. That's coming up. My conversation with former presidential candidate, former mayor, and former Cabinet Secretary for the Department of Transportation and fellow veteran Pete Buttigieg. So that's where I am, New York City, and frankly, it's fucking cold. It's still cold. It's April now, believe it or not, and I thought we would be into warmer times, but I've still got my winter coat on and my winter hat. I lost my regular winter hat in an Uber last night with my son, but unfortunately, I've still got my winter clothes. It feels like a never-ending winter, figuratively and literally. How am I? Whew, I'm tired. I don't know about you, but I feel like it's been an exhausting couple of months. It's also an intersection point where the kids are busy again. We've started Little League and we're doing spring football. We've got chess. I'm thankful that the kids are happy and healthy. My wife is busy at work. But April is a push, right? April and May is a big push before we finally get to the summer. And it's especially difficult given all the chaos happening in the world and when it's cold. But how are you? Sound off, let me know. Because I think it's important, most of all, that we check on each other. Not just the, hey, how you doing? But really, how are you doing? In times like this especially, we all have an obligation to help each other out and create a supportive community, because we're gonna need it. So let's take a walk and get into it. My top topics. So, on to my top topics. Let's start with something positive. Let's start with something inspirational. Let's start with New Jersey Senator Democrat Cory Booker. Because Senator Cory Booker did something this week. And that's really what's important. He did something. People have been crying out for Democrats to actually do something. And Cory Booker stepped to the floor of the Senate and did something. He did something really hard. He spoke out. He spoke from the heart. He spoke about people who were impacted by the first 70-something days of the Trump administration. And he stood on the floor of the Senate for 25 hours. That is a very hard thing to do. And in case you're wondering, he did not eat. He did not go to the bathroom. He stood his ground and stood up for what he believed in for 25 hours. And that, in and of itself, is important. Because people are looking for people to do something. They're also always inspired by people who do something hard. And in our sports-obsessed culture, they also love people who break records. And he broke records. Not only did he break the record for a senator, for the amount of time delivering a speech on the floor of the U.S. Senate, he also knocked off a bad guy, racist Strom Thurmond. And it was kind of epic and kind of amazing to see a black young senator in 2025 knock out the record holder who happened to be a racist, backward-ass, crazy person from a different age. And what Cory Booker did was important, not because he was a Democrat, but because he's a leader and because he inspired others to do something hard, and to speak out and fight for what they believe in. And that is what we want to teach our kids. That is what our country was founded on. And that is why I think it's something that should be celebrated.
Camera right there. Let me know. All right. Hello, everybody. I'm very sore and weary and tired, but I'm enormously grateful for a lot of folks who sent me their very, very personal stories. They gave me a chance to speak to the pain, hurt, fear, anger, demands of a lot of Americans. I'm so grateful to a lot of my colleagues and a lot of the help that people gave me to do this. I didn't know how long I could go, but I'm so grateful that I lasted for 25 hours.
Senator Booker, was it your goal coming in to speak longer than Strom Thurmond? And a question that so many people have is, how do you maintain the stamina? How did you not have to use the restroom for 25 hours?
Yeah.
Did you find a way to use the restroom? Can you talk to us about that?
A few things. One is I was very aware of Strom Thurmond's record since I've gotten to the Senate. I always felt that it was a strange shadow to hang over this institution, that the longest speech, with all the issues that have come up, all the noble causes that people have done, or the things that took to try to stop. I just found it strange that he had the record. And as a guy who's grew up with legends of the civil rights movement myself, of my parents and their friends, it just would seem wrong to me. It always seemed wrong. I had this hope that Chris Murphy would do it, actually. So I definitely had it on my mind, but as Chris and I joked, I'm 9 years older than when he and I did it for 15 hours, and my back was sore and my legs were hurting, so I just didn't know if I could, so I didn't want to set any expectations. The mission was really to elevate the voices of Americans, to tell some of their really painful stories, very emotional stories, and to let go and let God do the rest.
And your stamina.
It was also important because Cory Booker did something. He tried. Because what's most important is not always the outcome. That's what I teach my kids in Little League and all the kids I coach. The scoreboard doesn't always matter as much as the effort and the process. And if you put in the effort and you learn the process and you try to push beyond what you think you can do, that in and of itself is the outcome. Senator Cory Booker didn't pass any legislation, but he inspired people to do something, especially young people, to go beyond what they think they're capable of and to put in the effort. Now, let's talk about SignalGate. SignalGate continues to be in the news, although the Trump administration and Pete Hegseth and others do not want it in the news. They want to say it's over, it's behind them. And I've always told you, the harder they spin, the more important it is. And SignalGate is important because it's not just about Signal. It's also, we now know, about other platforms. It was discovered that Mike Waltz, National Security Advisor, also had his Venmo account, including his contacts out there in the universe for reporters to find. And now this week we also found out he's using Gmail for government conversations. You might say, oh, that's no big deal. It actually is a big deal. If you work at a company and you did your company work on your Gmail account, you'd probably be in violation of your company rules, whether you're a federal government employee or working at a Fortune 500 company. But for our national security advisor, he should not be using any unsecure, non-governmental sites for communication. That includes Gmail. Sloppy, sloppy, sloppy. That's what I continue to underscore. This administration and leaders like Mike Waltz are sloppy. And not just sloppy, but also incompetent. And our national security apparatus, our Pentagon, the place where we hold the nukes, is not exactly a place where we can afford to be sloppy or incompetent. So although the Trump administration might want it to be so, SignalGate is definitely not over. We need investigations and we need accountability, and we all need to stay vigilant. I've warned you that Pete Hegseth especially is sloppy and incompetent. He's also corrupt. And now we have two more examples that you might not have seen this week. First off, did you know his brother also works at the Department of Defense? Yes, Pete Hegseth's brother, Phil Hegseth, has apparently been installed as an advisor at the Department of Homeland Security and a liaison to the Department of Defense. So Phil Hegseth has been hanging out with Pete Hegseth as they go on trips to things like the UFC and Guantanamo. This is absolutely unacceptable, especially from an administration that's been trying to clean up the swamp and tackle nepotism. But it doesn't end there. Just when you think Pete Hegseth will outrage you, there's more, there's more, there's more. Yes, there's more. We also found out this week that Pete Hegseth has been including his wife in key security meetings. Yes, his wife, also a former Fox News producer, has been sitting in without being vetted, without having her security clearance checked, just sitting in on some key meetings with foreign officials and other leaders. Yes, they're sloppy and incompetent. Everything from disclosing operational security information on Signal to hiring their brother and bringing their wife into meetings. This is not okay. And in the flood of everything else that's happening, don't let it fall below your radar. So with our new format, I'm going to continue to give you periodic updates of where I am. Hopefully you're watching on YouTube. If you're not, please go to YouTube and subscribe now. We've almost hit 2,000 subscribers on YouTube. So help us push over that mark and break a record. It's not speaking on the Senate floor for 25 hours, but it's important as we continue to grow our audience and our reach. But I'm going to give you updates on where I am. And now, as I continue to walk north in Lower Manhattan and Battery Park, I'm passing Rockefeller Park. And also, just over there is Stuyvesant High School, one of the top public high schools in New York. And for those of you that are longtime listeners, you may remember my conversation with the founder of Sty Health, Lila Nordstrom. Lila Nordstrom was one of thousands of kids, high school kids, that went into that high school when it was reopened hastily after 9/11. It was that high school in this neighborhood that was coated in toxins after 9/11. Now it's beautiful and thriving and filled with playgrounds and kids, and even the flowers are out. You got a ping pong table and much more. It's a great neighborhood, and it's a sign and an example of how America can come back, but also a reminder to remember 20 years later, there are still kids that are now adults that are facing the long-term health impacts of those exposures in that high school years ago because of the decisions of adults, not their own. So in the days to come, when you hear about politicians that want to cut or reduce the 9/11 Health Compensation Act, remember, they're talking about health care for kids who were in that high school. It's another reason to hold them accountable and to never forget. As I continue to take you on this walk north along the Hudson River, over my left shoulder out there is the Statue of Liberty, which is, of course, a symbol of American liberty, greatness, aspirations, and dreams, but also a tremendous contrast to what we're seeing from Elon Musk. What am I going to call this weekly segment? What am I going to call this regular segment? I don't know what to call it except fuck Elon Musk. That's how everybody in America is feeling, or at least most Americans are feeling. And with this week, there's even more good reason to say fuck Elon Musk. Because if you didn't see, Elon Musk went on Fox News and doubled down on one of the most outrageous things he's ever done. He doubled down on calling Senator Mark Kelly, American patriot, former astronaut, senator from Arizona, recent guest on this show. He defended his comments, calling him a traitor. Check this out.
A lot is coming your way, but sometimes you say stuff or post stuff that gets attention. You give it out, in other words. Democratic Arizona Senator Mark Kelly posted on X about his trip to Ukraine to push for continuing to send U.S. weapons and support there, and you posted that he was a traitor. Well, why do that?
Well, I think somebody should care about the interests of the United States above the interests of another country. And If they don't, they're a traitor.
Yeah, but he's a decorated veteran, a former astronaut, a sitting U.S. senator.
It doesn't mean it's okay for him to put the interests of another country above America.
It's outrageous, it's shameful, and it's unacceptable. I've said we should boycott Tesla, I've said we should boycott SpaceX, but I'm going to continue to emphasize that we have to go further and ban him as a government contractor, a guy who continues to double down on calling a member of the Armed Services Committee a traitor, should not be allowed to have contracts with the Pentagon. Seems kind of obvious. Senator Mark Kelly is a patriot, and what he does every day continues to flex his patriotism and demonstrate his patriotism and show our children what patriotism is all about. Allowing Elon Musk to continue to be so close to the proximities of power and to allow Elon Musk to continue to have defense contracts, that is what's traitorous. Speaking of ridiculous, I'm wearing a hat and a coat because I'm outside and it's cold. Our ridiculous and shameful Vice President, J.D. Vance, did not do that on his recent, unacceptable, uninvited trip to Greenland. Check this out.
This territory, Greenland, really matters for the security of the United States. It's extremely vulnerable right now. And if the people of Greenland were willing to partner with the United States, and I think that they ultimately will partner with the United States, we could make them much more secure. We could do a lot more protection, and I think they'd fare a lot better economically as well. This has to happen. And the reason it has to happen, I hate to say it, is because our friends in Denmark have not done their job in keeping this area safe. They just haven't done it. It's very simple. For all of our friends in the American media who attack the administration for pointing out the obvious, what is the alternative? To give up the North Atlantic? To give up the Arctic to China, to Russia, and to other regimes that don't have the best interest of the American people at heart? We have no other option. We need to take a significant position in Greenland to keep the people here safe, but to keep our own country safe too.
Not only was he not invited, not only was he radical and ridiculous in his comments, he's so unprepared and half-cooked he didn't even bring a fucking hat to Greenland. There's no other way to explain it except this guy is a compromised and ridiculous clown. Who goes to a country that tells you not to come and then talk shit about that country? Our vice president, that's who. So my message to him and President Trump is quite clear. Leave Greenland alone. Can we please leave the peace-loving people of Greenland alone? Can you please stop sending J.D. Vance there? Can you please stop threatening military action? And I'd say the same about Canada and Panama and any other number of countries that are our allies that they've recently threatened. But most importantly, leave Greenland alone. Vance is becoming more and more ridiculous and shameful by the day. As far as vice presidents go, he's making Dan Quayle look like a superstar. And this ridiculous bad photo op in Greenland is the perfect bookend to last week's disgusting charade by Kristi Noem, where she stood in front of a bunch of prisoners in El Salvador. To the people of Greenland and to the people of the world, I will continue to emphasize and ask my fellow independent Americans to emphasize the same. J.D. Vance does not speak for us. Speaking of Greenland, check this out.
Cold silence of the tundra, a bond was born, not from treaties or trade, but from blood and bravery. While Germany controlled Europe, the Nazis set their sights on the Arctic. Greenland became an unwitting combatant, and the United States stepped in, not to conquer, but to protect. In 1943, nearly 1,000 American soldiers, with 4 chaplains, set sail from New York to Greenland, carrying with them hope, duty, and a quiet fear. But their ship was torpedoed by a Nazi U-boat, and the frigid waters of the North Atlantic became a grave. Those 4 chaplains gave up their life vests, giving their lives so that others might live, to protect America and Greenland. Their sacrifices helped win our freedom, and we will never forget. Together, Americans and Greenlanders stood as sentinels at the top of the world. But today, Greenland faces new threats, from Russian aggression and Chinese expansion. Our shared legacy lives on in every joint mission, every Arctic patrol, every partnership forged in the shadow of melting ice and rising tensions. This is not just history, it is destiny. Now is the time to stand together again. For peace, for security, For the future, America stands with Greenland.
This is a very crafty, effective, and manipulative piece of propaganda that was posted by our Secretary of Defense, not on his official account, but on his personal account, his personal X account. It is a highly political, highly extreme, highly unacceptable method of communication from our Secretary of Defense. And it was paid for by a Trump dark money group called Securing America's Greatness Incorporated. It's a 501c4. This is not the kind of political stuff you've ever seen coming from the Pentagon. That's why I continue to emphasize and I continue to draw your focus to the fact that this is by far not just the most politically extreme Secretary of Defense in American history, but the most overtly political. And what they're doing at Department of Defense is a playbook. They're showing you what they're going to do, not just at the Department of Defense, but at the other agencies in the federal government. Everything they want to do across American society, they are doing first at the Pentagon. So keep an eye out and stay vigilant. And as I've continued to emphasize, everything they're doing at the Pentagon is first. And just about always second is the VA. And that includes the radical, politically extreme Secretary of Veterans Affairs, Doug Collins. He's continuing to push the Trump agenda, to defend Elon Musk and DOGE, to try to spin 85,000 or so cuts at the Department of Veterans Affairs, and attack the media. Watch this.
Do you believe that a mistake was made here, though, to have this conversation, to add a reporter, and to have it on an unsupported, classified group setting?
Caitlin, as I've just told you, I've just answered the question. I wasn't a part of it. And, I'm not going to speculate more than what the president's already talked about and those who've been involved have talked about. But we'd love to talk about the veterans.
Yeah, and I do have questions about the veterans. But given what we saw with the group chat and how this was used, you are a member of the cabinet. You obviously know these other members, several of them who were in there. Is this typical for the cabinet to have conversations over Signal? Is this something that you use?
Well, Caitlin, Senator, you undoubtedly do not want to talk about the VA. I have a question as VA Secretary. As Cabinet, I want to ask you, because I've been curious about this, because my job is to take care of veterans, and I would like to know why CNN is hostile to veterans, especially one in Florida, where you just had a $5 million defamation suit taking offense at a veteran who was trying to help people. In fact, one of your employees actually said, we're going to nail him. I have a question for you, Caitlin. Is that employee still employed? Are you really concerned about veterans? So if we don't want to talk about veterans now, you want to talk about everything else, I'd like to hear from CNN as the Veteran Cabinet Secretary why CNN seems to have a problem with veterans.
Well, Mr. Secretary, respectfully, my question was about whether or not you as a member of the cabinet use this. And respectfully, I'm conducting the investigation. And I do have a lot of questions for you on Veterans Affairs, but I don't think it would be unwarranted to ask if you as a member of the cabinet.
I've already answered. And if you want to...
Also, probably below your radar, tragically below your radar. In the midst of all the other chaos in America and around the world, 4 American soldiers died tragically in a training accident in Lithuania. 4 young Americans who gave their life in defense, in sacrifice of the freedom of others. Yeah, lots of times you hear about people dying in combat. But the message to understand is that any kind of military job is dangerous and requires sacrifice and undertakes tremendous risk. So I ask you to keep these 4 brave soldiers in your hearts and to keep their families in your hearts as well. And if you want to do something to help them, check out Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors. We've had the amazing founder of TAPS, Bonnie Carroll, on this show many times before, but they are there first. They are there often, and they are there always for the families of the fallen. Long after the headlines are gone, TAPS is there. When I say look for the helpers, I mean look for helpers like the folks at TAPS, who are there right now, helping these 4 families and countless other families of the fallen. Also below your radar this week, and something I am going to continue to focus on. Every week in America, more noble government servants are being purged from the federal government, and more veterans. And this week, it was announced that 10,000 more will be fired from the Department of Health and Human Services, led, of course, by the least independent, self-proclaimed formerly independent, who used to be a Democrat before he became a Republican, RFK Jr., who this week announced he's firing 10,000 people at the Department of Health and Human Services. 10,000 people. That means roughly 3,333 more veterans fired. For decades, we worked to lower the unemployment rate for veterans, and now they're firing them by the thousands. And if they stay on track, their target of firing 1 million people in the federal government, that means 300,000 veterans will lose their jobs just in the first year. I will continue to emphasize there is an opportunity in this chaos. Every one of those veterans that's fired is a part of the patriotic purge. They are a group of people who will fight back against these cuts and all the other mindless mayhem. And if you're one of those veterans who've been fired, we encourage you to join us at independentveteransofamerica.org. We are fighting back, and I encourage you to run for office. You want to get some payback, you want to push back, you want to fight for change, you can do it by running for your local school board, running for a community council, or running for Congress. We've got over 300 veterans who've already reached out, and we expect to get hundreds more. So, don't let them knock you off the field. Come back stronger, come back with others, and come back to win. Also below the radar this week, the carnage continues in Ukraine. The American government may not want to focus on it anymore, but we will. This week, Trump announced Liberation Day. Well, if he was really focused on liberation, he would be focused on the people of Ukraine. Putin continued his unlawful and illegal war, pelting and damaging civilian targets and killing civilians with more drone and missile attacks. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. President Trump does not speak for most Americans on Ukraine. And now we have a new Gallup poll with more information to confirm it. 69% of Americans want the U.S. to sustain or increase our military support for the people of Ukraine. Underscore that Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, and Pete Buttigieg do not speak for most Americans on Ukraine. And they also don't speak for all Republicans, because this information was tweeted this week by Representative Don Bacon, who is a Republican from Nebraska, the same independent-minded place that produced Dan Osborne this past year. But Don Bacon continues to push against Trump on Ukraine specifically, underscoring that all Republicans don't even agree with Donald Trump on Ukraine. And coming up soon, Representative Don Bacon will join me on this show. Stay tuned for that, as we will continue to keep Ukraine on our radar. As I continue to walk north along the Hudson, now you can see Stuyvesant High School is behind me. There again is the World Trade Center and Pier 25's basketball courts, one of the best basketball courts. It's cold, but there are still people out there playing, which reminds me that March Madness is not over yet. We are down to the Final Four, and it's going to be a good one. We've got all number 1 seeds clashing this weekend, and I'll remind you that next week we will announce our winner of the first ever Independent Americans March Madness bracket. Stay tuned for that and more. As we head into April, the madness of March continues, and we continue to look for fighters of any party that can push back against this authoritarian push that we've seen in the last 70 days. The Republicans have taken us down a dangerous path, and I've continued to emphasize that the Democrats won't save us. But Senator Booker showed some signs of hope this week, and he wasn't the only one, because as veterans continue to be fired across the federal government, and the Department of Veterans Affairs continues to be decimated, one veteran is pushing back. Previous guest on this show, newly elected Arizona Democrat Ruben Gallego, who this week announced he is putting a hold on all VA nominees until he gets answers about these firings from VA Secretary Collins. And here's what I have to say. That's the spirit. I don't care if it comes from a Republican, a Democrat, or an independent. If someone stands up to fight for our communities and for our values, they're doing the right thing, and they should be applauded. And I'm excited to tell you that Senator Ruben Gallego will be back on this show in a couple of weeks, so stay tuned for that. In the meantime, look out for him and any other veterans inside of politics and out that are stepping up to defend our community and defend our values. As I continue our walk up the Hudson River on the west side of Manhattan, I bring you to Pier 25 skate park. It's cold out there, but there's still kids skating, and it's one of the best skate parks around. Check it out if you're ever around. Ruben Gallego isn't the only Democrat pushing back. I've been critical of the Republicans and critical of the Democrats, but I also will give credit where credit's due. I give credit to Republican Don Bacon, who's standing up on Ukraine. I give credit to Ruben Gallego, who is standing up for veterans being fired at the VA. And I give credit to the man I had a conversation with recently on Instagram, a man who's been a guest on this show, a man who is a Democrat, but I really wish would declare as an independent. He's the kind of Democrat that could break ranks with his party and jumpstart a new movement of Democrats and Republicans who leave their parties and declare their independence. There were many calls for him to run for the U.S. Senate in Michigan, which he said he won't. But nevertheless, he has been a consistent voice of reason. He's been a strong advocate for veterans and for American values. And maybe most importantly, he's been an honorable person who is bringing a smart and respectful tone to our politics. He's been a guest on this show before, and I'm happy to share with you now another voice that I want to elevate, and I'm also continuing to challenge, because he's a leader who can take a challenge. It's a conversation I had recently with my friend, the former presidential candidate, former mayor, and former Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg. I'm passing the playgrounds now that are here on Pier 25 in New York, and maybe that's fitting, because at the end of the day, we have to remember, our enemies are watching, our adversaries are concerned, but most of all, our children are watching. And that's why I think Pete Buttigieg is so important. He's a role model, not just for us as adults, but especially for our children. And now more than ever is a time where we need positive role models for our children, people who can tell us what the future might look like and can embody it with a series of respectful and honorable values. We need leaders who can be examples for our kids. And most importantly, that's what I think Pete Buttigieg is. So welcome to my conversation with Pete Buttigieg. Welcome to April. Welcome to our first episode of Walking and Talking with me. Welcome to Independent Americans, episode 327.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing well, man. It's great to see you. Thank you so much for having me. Welcome
Thanks
to
for taking a minute to talk.
welcome to my kids' room, as you can relate, man. I got two little ones, and one's been battling a fever, but he's coming back. But it's great to talk to you, man. It's never been more important.
Oh no, been there. Yeah, good luck on getting around the corner. We got between the twins. I feel like every day we're rolling the dice on one of them having a fever, needing to stay home or something. So definitely feel you on that. Finally got him.
Time of year, man. But you know what? It's a good reminder, because that's why we do it, right? I mean, it's obviously about the veterans community, but it's about the extended family that is all of us that served, and that includes our kids, man. And so many kids that have moms and dads and parents that are in the crosshairs right now.
Absolutely.
So, my kids are better, but I'm pissed off, and I know you are too, and a lot of other folks are around the country. And I think it's a really important time to have this conversation. So thank you for doing it.
Yeah, how can we not be pissed off when we see them coming after the workers who take care of our veterans, many of whom are veterans themselves? What are you hearing from your friends and contacts in the community, folks you serve with, folks who are out there? You've done so much over the years to advocate for veterans to get better care. We've seen growth in the VA. The PACT Act meant a lot more people are eligible for care, only to get this news that they're going to slash and burn so much of the VA. What are folks saying to you?
Well, you know, you came on my show when it used to be called Angry Americans. Now it's called Independent Americans. And we used to say, you know, if you're not angry, you're not paying attention. And I think that's how people feel right now. If you're not angry, you're not paying attention, or maybe you're complicit, which is some of the folks that are now working with the administration on this. I mean, it started really last year, Pete, for the people who know what's going on. They knew that the VA was going to be a big target for Elon Musk, for DOGE, for Trump. They've talked about this for decades, and now it's kind of their demented extremist fantasy coming to life, where now they can send not even a meat axe. I had Senator Mark Kelly on my show this week, who's a Navy veteran like you, and he said, you know, it's like a meat axe. I said, no, it's like a flamethrower. It's a flamethrower, and that flamethrower is now firmly focused on the Department of Veterans Affairs. They know it's symbolically important. They know that it employs hundreds of thousands of people. The budget is big, and it should be, and it's sacred and symbolic. And I think all of that may have had people worried last year. And the first folks I heard from, Pete, are my friends who work at the VA. And like you, I have so many of them. And they had this uncertainty and this instability. And even now, so many of them are just kind of waiting, checking their email to see if the DOGE guillotine is going to drop on their inbox. So it's tremendous anxiety. And I liken it to being in the military. Like, they don't need this shit. They have a really important mission, and they should be focused on that. And the destabilizing effect is already hurting their morale. It's hurting their families. It's removing their focus. It's killing recruiting. Like, we're going to have a hard time recruiting at VA for a generation because of this kind of disruption. But I think the important insight too, Pete, is that it's totally bipartisan. You know, you're a Democrat, I'm an independent. People across the spectrum are furious. And I think that the Trump administration and the new VA Secretary Collins have kind of miscalculated here. I know some folks are beaten down. I know folks are frustrated. This could be a sign of hope, because veterans can be a core of the opposition to what's happening. The patriotic purged can be the core of the people who fight back. And I'm seeing that. I'm seeing people who are mobilizing, who are active, who are getting out in front. People who've never been involved in politics before think this is wrong and stupid and short-sighted and damaging and bad for not just our collective mental health, but even for our national security. So I think it's an opportunity for activation. And that's why I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. People are looking for leaders, and our veterans have always stepped up just like you have, and they're stepping up right now, man.
I'm so glad you said that. This could be an empowering moment for so many veterans, so many families, and so many Americans. I know there's this feeling that the news coming out of Washington is just steamrolling all of us. But the reality is they back down sometimes. A good example, they tried to freeze all the transportation funding, like all of it on day one. They gave up pretty quickly on that. So this is not some unstoppable force, especially when they hear from people. And I think there's a lot of folks in Congress who are incredibly nervous about this, a lot of congressional Republicans who know better, but are going to stand, or at least can be pushed to stand up to this sort of thing. And of course, you know, one proof of that is the triumph of getting the PACT Act done in the first place. I remember you mentioning the contrast between what happened on the west front of the Capitol on January 6th and how horrifying that was for our country. And then what happened on the East Capitol when a bunch of veterans basically shamed Congress into doing the right thing, right? Do you just remind folks of that story and connect that to what's going on now? Because I think it's really important for folks to understand that, both as evidence that you, even in today's Washington, you can make change, and as just a specific example of what's at stake here when it comes to the PACT Act. Because from what I can tell, all the people that are going to fire are the people who would be getting more veterans signed up for care.
Yeah, I think the most important activists in American history have almost always been veterans, right? George Washington was the first guy who said, when we assumed the soldier, we did not lay aside the citizen. And he went from being, you know, an active duty officer to president, and our last independent president, unfortunately, in my view. But every generation, from JFK to George Bush, you know, they were involved in the military, and then they came home and led in politics and led in civil society, like you have. So I think we can hearken back to those things. And the reality is, veterans have been fighting for their rights and for support from the beginning. And the PACT Act was a manifestation of decades of fighting. Vietnam veterans had to fight to have Agent Orange even recognized. And many of my mentors and friends have already died from Agent Orange exposure, toxin exposures. They dropped chemicals on these men and women, and they got sick. Pretty basic. But they had to fight until really the PACT Act was passed to have proper support, recognition, and care. And that's what the PACT Act did. It expanded VA care for 1 million people, right? 1 million people from Vietnam to our time that were exposed to toxins, like me. I was in Iraq, I was in Kuwait, I was around burn pits. They burned tons of shit in the air, and we breathed it in. And I think for folks who maybe are still not wrapping their head around what this is like, let me give you a more immediate comparison. 9/11 exposures. Because I am right now just a couple blocks from Ground Zero, where I served on 9/11 in the National Guard. We breathed in all that stuff. We got sick. Many of us have already died. And I think bringing this all back full circle, Pete, there's going to be a protest next Thursday because we're fighting again for 9/11 health support. They're trying to come after 9/11 health workers and cut the budget there as well. So we're going to rally on the Capitol on Thursday. And the insight here is that when veterans fight back, we often win, right? Jon Stewart had to go down there and shame them into passing the PACT Act. But what the PACT Act did was expand the services for people who are dying. It's pretty basic, right? Now what Collins, who is, in my view, a very radical, extreme VA secretary, wants to do is he says he's chopping back to what it was before that time in 2019, but it's indiscriminate. There's no larger strategy. There's no goal. We don't know if there are more cuts coming, and I would anticipate that there are. But these cuts are going to be 83,000 VA workers scheduled supposedly for August. A quarter of everyone who works at the VA is a veteran. And it's not just them, Pete. This is why I think it's a much bigger issue. Because as you know, a third of every federal worker is a veteran. So what they're looking at doing is laying off potentially hundreds of thousands of veterans around the country. And we've worked for 2 decades, not just to expand the PACT Act, but also to lower the veteran unemployment rate, which we finally got to a historic low of 4% last month. You know what's going to happen to that thing? It's going to get blown up because they're laying off hundreds of thousands of veterans. And really important, Pete, you're one of the smartest guys I know in politics. You're always thinking strategically. You offer solutions. They have no solution for what all these unemployed veterans are supposed to do. They're not offering them an off-ramp into another job. Elon Musk isn't hiring them at Tesla or SpaceX. So they're going to go out, and they're going to collect unemployment, right? So this is a really short-sighted, stupid thing, but I want to make a really important point, Pete. It's not about veterans because they don't care about veterans. They have a larger strategy to push forward a radical agenda to seize the powers of government and transform society in the way they want. Veterans are in the way. And what I want folks who are listening to remember, this is how they're treating retired generals. This is how they're treating veterans. They started with us. How do you think they're going to treat everyone else? How do you think they're going to treat you? Because that's what's coming next. And that's why I hope that this can be an alarm bell that activates people from their depression and get out from under the covers. We need you to fight. This is an important time, and this is a really important crossroads for us to take a stand.
Exactly right. I mean, we got to resist this urge to tune out, right? And I get it. Like, we got, your kid is sick, you got other things to do. Yeah. It's already been exhausting to watch the news for the last few years. Now we're in this moment where it just feels like every time you check your feed, every time you open the news, every time you watch TV, it's punching you in the face. But this is an opportunity to stand up and fight back. People respond when veterans stand up. People across the political spectrum get it. There is, I mean, I grew up in a country where the one thing we could all agree on is a sacred duty to take care of veterans, and they're going right at the heart of this. And I think you're right. This is part of a design. This is part of a radical ideology. This isn't normal Republican or normal Democrat stuff. This is something that really is next level destructive. And I'm also glad you mentioned solutions, because let's be clear. Shaking things up at the VA, I think in many ways is something you and I are both very supportive of, right? Of course, there need to be changes. It needs to be modernized. There's been a lot of progress the last few years. There's a lot more to do. I think everybody gets that. I think they're trying to hide behind that a little bit to say, oh, yeah, we're just reforming it, making it more efficient. But they can't even explain to the people they already fired why they fired them, right? Other than because they can. It wasn't that they weren't doing a good job. It wasn't that they systematically analyzed, their positions and said this one's more important than that one. We saw the same thing at the FAA. They just fired everybody that they could on day one. Now they're going after tens of thousands of more workers later on this year, and there's just no way you can do that without having an impact on the services people count on every day. So I think a lot of people watching this right now are saying, okay, so what do I do? Like, how do I do something about it? And to me, I mean, first of all, it sounds old fashioned, but it really does matter when you call your member of Congress. I mean, we're doing it right here in our district. I think wherever you live, frankly, especially if your member of Congress is in the same party as the president, you can make your voice heard, and that matters. You mentioned this protest going on about 9/11 responders and their care being at risk. It's great to know there are opportunities to get offline, on the streets, in person, do something else about it. What else do you think people can do to make sure their voices are heard at a moment like this and stop this injury to American veterans from happening?
I think the smart thing to do to start, and I said this in my podcast this week, is brace yourself for a long fight. Get your mindset in a place where we are basically going to go through, however long or short it is, kind of a Great Depression, a new Great Depression, a cultural, political, artistic, moral Great Depression. And we're going to have to fight through it. It's going to be long. It's going to be hard. It's going to suck. There are going to be casualties, but we have to keep our eyes on the prize and know that we can weather the storm, and there will be a better day for America. I think that's important because you got to get through the ups and downs that will inevitably come. Right? And then you've got to focus on understanding the larger strategy. And this is a radical strategy because I'm an independent, Pete. I've worked with Democrats and Republicans. I've seen the far left liberals like Bernie Sanders who wanted to make VA care the norm for all, and I've been critical. I said he apologized too often for the VA. And then I've seen the right wing, which was led largely by Pete Hegseth for a long time, when he ran a group called Concerned Veterans for America that had a different, more radical ideology of breaking down the VA, privatizing the shit out of all of it, and making it their proof of concept for what they want to do with America. Most Americans are in the middle, Pete. Most Americans are moderate. Most Americans want practical solutions. And I think that's where we have to sit. We have to focus on that and calling it out for what it is. Recognizing also, if I had to predict, Pete, they're going to fire these 83,000 people, right? And they're probably going to fire more. And what we have to think strategically about is how to support them, right? Fight them as hard as you can in the 5-meter target, but also support these vets who are coming out. And that means moral support, the community wrapping around it, whether it's your church group or your school, helping them and their families, providing them opportunities for employment, making sure that reasonable people in Congress offer them unemployment, other types of support, and then join the fucking movement, because this is gonna be the movement, not just vets, but retired people from the military, people like CQ Brown who just got fired, all the generals at the Pentagon, the FBI agents. The patriotic purge are gonna be the foundation of what I think is a very moderate, reasonable, patriotic opposition. So when you see veterans protests start to unfold, which they will, I think there's gonna be some as early as next Friday in the Capitol and around the country. When you see veterans protesting at Tesla dealerships, that's going to happen pretty soon, I guarantee you. Join that movement. And for the veterans themselves, I'm going to tell you, we need you. And I'm running a new group now called Independent Veterans of America. We are recruiting, training, and supporting independent veterans to run for office. So if you are, like most of the country, half of the country, that's not a Democrat or Republican, or you're a Democrat or Republican that has had it with the parties and wants to run as a patriot, not as a partisan, we're recruiting. From Senate all the way down to school board. We ran 11 candidates last year, supported folks like Dan Osborne, who many folks saw in Nebraska almost take out a radical Republican, Deb Fischer. But we have folks who are running all over the country, and we need you. Get involved. We need your leadership at the school board level, for Congress, for Senate, and maybe even one day to challenge you for president, Pete, if they run. Maybe it'll be your running mate or vice versa. But I think we have to have a long-term view, right? This has to be almost like the anti-war movement, Pete. I think that's a parallel here. And I don't think the leaders are going to come from Washington. It's not going to be a congressperson or a senator. It's going to be the next John Kerry. It's going to be the next Bobby Mueller. It's going to be the next civil rights leader that emerges from young people or from the purge. They're going to seize this moment, and we got to support those leaders. That's the last point. You got, when those courageous leaders like you and so many others step forward, we got to have their back, because it's not easy. It's dangerous. It's scary. And we got to make sure we protect them as a community.
I'm so glad you said that. I think fierce opposition when people are doing the wrong thing, positive reinforcement, especially, frankly, when you think about how much pressure will come on any Republican or independent who tries to do the right thing and stand up to this, as well as being there for Democrats who are standing up to this, because this is not a Democrat-Republican thing. Although I will argue why, you know, my party has put forward better answers than any of this Project 2025 stuff. But the bottom line is patriotic opposition is, I think, the thing I'm really going to take away from this. So we got to wrap. I know you're taking care of a sick kiddo. I got to take care of something else here at the house, but really glad that we had this conversation. I'm going to post this to my profile. Folks can get more information in links about some of those calls to action that we talked about. Paul, thanks for everything you're doing for this country.
I want to thank you. Every time that you've been on my show, I've thanked you for this, and I want to thank you again. You know, you are a role model for our children, and you're a great patriot. And, you know, the politics in times like this, your political affiliation is so secondary to your patriotism. But for year after year, you continue to represent the best of what America is all about. And our kids so badly need leaders they can look up to right now. And you have been that. Your family has been that for years now. And that's a tremendous sacrifice. Leadership is about sacrifice. And I want to thank you for your personal sacrifice. But most of all, man, for your personal example. You're a great American. And we need you now more than ever.
Well, I'll keep trying to live up to that. Appreciate it. Thanks for everything you're doing. Thanks for today.
Thank you.
Glad we got
brother. Appreciate it, man. Take care, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. My thanks to Pete Buttigieg for joining me, and my thanks to you for coming along on this experimental new kind of format for our episodes. I want to continue to give you recommendations from time to time. So here they are, my Reichoff's recommendations. Number 1, did you know that New York City has mini golf? There's lots of things you probably didn't know about New York City. There's lots of things I don't know about New York City. But when you see people like Kristi Noem and others come here and shit on New York, including Morgan Whalen recently on his trip to New York City for Saturday Night Live, he said he was going back to God's country. Well, I think God's country comes in all forms. And that includes places like New York, places like Alabama, and everything in between. But part of God's country also includes mini golf. So my recommendation to you as the weather gets warm, you may not be a golfer, but how fun is mini golf? Go ahead out there and play some mini golf, whether it's in New York or somewhere else. Mini golf gets my thumbs up. Continuing Reichoff's recommendations, we all need a break every once in a while, so I'm going to continue to talk about shows, books, music that I like. And there's a series I've been finally watching on Max, which used to be HBO and used to be Cinemax and is now called Max. I can't believe they dumped HBO. But if you haven't seen it already, The Last of Us is a fantastic post-apocalyptic series on Max. I've really been enjoying it. I know I'm late in checking it out, but if you need an escape, check out The Last of Us on Max. It is awesome. My final recommendation. Spring is almost here. We celebrated Eid, we celebrate Passover, we celebrate Easter, we celebrate none of those things, just the warm weather coming. Whatever you're celebrating, spring is almost here. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you rode a bike? Have you ridden a bike lately? I'm lucky. One of the great parts about living in New York City is I get to ride a city bike all around. And my kids learn how to ride bikes early. But there's something freeing. There's something amazing about just getting on a bicycle and riding. And if you haven't done it in a while, maybe because you're an adult and you haven't had time, maybe you live in a tough area, whatever it is, I recommend that you get on a bike. I think even 5 minutes will help relieve your stress and help you feel a little bit more free as we all ride into the spring. Every episode, I tell you to look for the helpers. Please reach out and continue to share with me your helpers, folks that are stepping up when others run out. These folks are running in. I mentioned it earlier, but I want to give another shout out to our friends at the Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors. They're running in when others run out. This week, as 4 American soldiers were tragically killed in Lithuania, the folks from TAPS are stepping up yet again. So check out TAPS. They're truly the helpers. I also want to give a big shout out to our Patreon members, all of you who continue to support this work. If you haven't joined our Vigilant, Very Vigilant, and Most Vigilant, please go to independentamericans.us now and you can join us. You can also get some great Independent Americans merch. You can get it in advance of Mother's Day, in advance of Father's Day, in advance of Easter, Passover, anything you need. I hope you like this experimental new format for Independent Americans. Let us know what you think and continue to share this show far and wide. Because independents are the hope for the future. And know that you're not alone in your independence. And that independence will help you stay vigilant. Know that you're not alone in your vigilance. We are all vigilant. And we're all in this together. Declaring our independence. Pushing back against the status quo. Adding light to contrast to heat. And continuing to build a new movement that can move us all forward into the spring. And representing a new movement that can bring hope for America. Like these flowers in the spring. And stay vigilant, my friends, because eternal vigilance is the price of freedom. And hope is still the oxygen of democracy. And no, you're not alone in your vigilance. We are all vigilant. I'm your host, Paul Reichoff. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Thank you for going on this walk with me, where we have flowers and kids playing soccer and people running and the beautiful Statue of Liberty here in New York City. Down with Hamas, down with Putin, Slava Ukraine, and stay vigilant, America. And happy April. Goodbye from New York.
Powered by Righteous Media.